Good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of Mark's Inspiration. Thank you to my 1,371 subscribers today. Let's make it 2. Like and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. We have a video coming out every day. About 9:30 in the morning is when they come out, Central Standard Time. Today, we're going to continue with Coming Back Home, The True Adventure of Mark Daniels. Wow. And we are on chapter 6. A little bit crooked here. Chapter 6, Freedom of a Kind. In 1969, the movie Easy Rider came out, and my life was changed forever. I went to see it by myself at the Trojan Theater. For those that haven't had the pleasure, Easy Rider follows two men as they ride their Harley-Davidson motorcycles across the country, doing drugs, loving women, a lot of women, and generally searching for freedom. For me, a child of the 60s trapped in a life I hated by people I believed hated or at the very least cared little for me, that movie was a shockwave. These two vagabonds immediately became my heroes. Everything they stood for became my truth, and their life became my goal. Gotta have goals. Even if you don't have worthy goals, gotta have a goal. And, they were my saviors, all the way down to the red, white, and blue helmets they wore. I wanted every bit of it. I went home and asked my parents for a mini bike for my birthday that year, and to my surprise, I got it. It was a Briggs & Stratton with small wheels and a rope pull start. It wasn't always easy to start. I'd get frustrated, cranking and cranking away, but I'd eventually get it going. I loved to ride that bike, and I did. I love motorcycles. I did most of my riding at my grandparents' farm. They lived far out in the country where there were ample gravel roads and few police officers. In the summer evenings, I would ride from the farm to the nearest highway and watch the motorcycles as they went by. I would dream of being out there, just riding. It didn't matter where to, just whatever the freedom of the road took me, wherever the freedom of the road took me, as long as it was somewhere other than Troy, Missouri. Every motorcycle that passed was music to my ears and a song in my heart. Wherever they were going, it had to be an adventure. I just knew that was what I needed to be doing. From that time on, riding represented freedom to me in a way that nothing else could. Freedom from the prison of myself, my fears, my feelings, everything. When I felt the wind on my face, all my problems seemed to melt away. Life was open and limitless. That was worth any price I had to pay for it. Gotta have a dream. But life was changing for me in big ways, or maybe I was changing. Maybe it was the newfound freedom that came with my new bike, or maybe it was those age-old hormones that tend to show up in every young person's story. Whatever it was, 6th grade marked a major turning point in me. My grades, which had always been exemplary, began dropping. Every subject just seemed like some kind of an expanded repeat of what they had already taught me. I couldn't see the use in any of it, and my parents hated me regardless of my grades, so why should I care? They didn't really hate me, but that's how I felt. Maybe I hated myself. Okay, and most importantly, none of it was bringing me any closer to my Easy Rider dream. I quit trying. Then there was basketball. My mom had been a basketball star in high school, so I thought I would give it a shot. In my first game against the school my mother had played for, I got chewed out by the coach for using a one-handed pass when I should have used both hands. He called it a fancy dribble pass. To me, it was the only pass that made sense for the circumstance I was in at the moment, during the flow of the game. But he benched me for the rest of the game, even though the ball had made it to the other player, and we had scored on the play. Yeah, I didn't get that. Oh well. That was enough for me, so I quit that too. And my mom made sure to remind me that I was a quitter. I heard that all my life when I was younger. I probably did quit a lot of things. But now it's turned me into a person that never gives up and never quits. So that helped me. Mom helped me. I already knew that, though I knew I was everything disappointing and would live up to the reputation many more times during my life. But the biggest changes in me came as a result of a change in my grandmother. During my 6th grade year, she had a stroke while she was out in the woods on the farm. By some providence, she made it back to the house and made a full recovery. But my grandfather was terrified it would happen again and that they wouldn't be so lucky, so he moved them to the small town that was nearest to the farm. This opened up a whole new group of people for me. When I would visit the farm, I'd ride my 10-speed bike around town looking for people to hang out with. I couldn't take my mini bike because I wasn't supposed to ride one at that age, and it was too loud for town anyway. I quickly came to know people of that town, and they soon came to know me as 10-speed. I made all the keg parties, most of them keg of beers. Most of the kids I hung out with were much older than me. I didn't know why, but that has always been the case for me. My drinking really took off around that time. I hadn't drank since my dad got me extremely drunk that night after hunting. Oddly enough, this was also right about the time he quit drinking. I don't think I ever got the real story on that. My mom told me that she had threatened to leave him if he didn't quit. I also heard that a doctor had told him he was on his way to an early grave and decided to quit for his health. Maybe it was for both, maybe neither. I picked up where he left off. I loved drinking at parties or with the groups of friends I made in that town. I had that feeling again, like I was part of something. We had our favorite places down by the river, under the trestle bridge, but our favorite hangout was the Joint. It was an old abandoned house we found down by the old short line railroad tracks. It was everything a kid wanting to be free needed. It had a living room with a fireplace and 2 bedrooms. We'd build our fire and watch it burn while we drank or smoked weed or both. We developed a reputation, and when we would go into town to get cigarettes or booze, we'd see people whispering and glancing sideways at us, no doubt guessing at all the things we were doing in that old blockhouse. They were right. Yes, they were. Quite a few of us would hang out there, 10 or maybe a few more than 10 at times, but we didn't bother anyone, and nobody ever bothered us, even though everyone knew about it. The police never came. Yeah, they never did. Strange. They had their hands full with the bigger parties, the ones down by the bridge at the river. I went to those too. There would be people from all the surrounding towns. I spent many nights sleeping down by the river, so drunk I didn't even want to drive. Not that I was afraid of being pulled over. Back then, as long as you weren't an asshole to the police, they would let you off. The parties were normally pretty calm, with the occasional fight. But sometimes things would get out of hand with the out-of-towners. There was this one man that came to the parties everyone called Rick the Redneck. Yes, I remember him. He didn't always come, but when he did, you knew you had to keep your eye on him. He was the kind of guy that got crazier than the more he drank. Well, one night we were all teasing Rick the Redneck for his deep drawl, and he didn't take it very well. Little did we know he had a gun in his belt. He pulled it and threatened to shoot us all up, and we immediately changed course. He calmed down. Fortunately, Rick was really an all right guy, so long as he was sober. They say alcohol brings the truth out in people, but I don't drink I don't think that's true. I think for some people it brings out their insecurities, and for others it helps them escape from them. I had plenty of insecurities to escape from. My brother helped in that department as well. He had turned 16, and I would often come along with him and his friends on the road trips. That's what we called driving around, going nowhere in particular while drinking lots of beer. Everyone drank and drove back then. It's just what you did. I think the only reason I didn't kill myself or someone else is due to the simple fact that there just weren't as many people on the road in those days. I did, however, promise myself that I would never ride my motorcycle while I was drunk or high, but that was just the first of many promises I didn't keep. My brother drove a '67 Mustang, so he and his friends always had the most beautiful girls along with them. To my surprise, they really liked me. Not as anything more than a friend, not yet, at least since I was 3 years younger, but we got along well. Little did I know, going on those road trips and getting to know all of my brother's friends, that would lead me to my first sexual experience. It was carnival time in town, and the carnival was just 2 blocks from my house, so I decided to check out the festivities. I had dropped by the site to help them set up the previous week, so I had a few dollars in my pocket. In hindsight, I think the carnival runners knew the local kids would end up just giving the money back to them for the admission. So it was basically free labor for them. That night, I ran into 2 of my brother's road trip friends at the carnival. One was actually the first guy I ever bought weed off of. Quite the character. That one, he later spent many years in prison for trying to burn down a local police officer's home, but that's another story. Yeah, he's gone now. He passed away about a year or 2 ago. Quite a character. I always got along with him. When I ran into my brother's 2 friends, they were already on their way out of the carnival. Even though it was early on Friday night, they were heading to a grassy area on the hill that was well known in the town as a place kids went to be alone. Walking with them was a girl known as, how do I say this delicately, the town easy girl. They have other words for those girls now. I was really conflicted about being with a girl at all, much less one that knew was being taken advantage of for her willingness. But these were my brother's close friends, and they were my ticket to beer, freedom, and perhaps more than anything, a reputation among the older kids. Because I felt like I was a nobody back then. I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to fit in. So I went with them to this grassy hill about a block from the fair, and before we even made it to the top, the girl had started taking off her clothes. They were there for one reason, and she wasn't wasting any time. Part of me was surprised, I think. I might have thought I was going to learn that her reputation was unfair or exaggerated, that she was really a good girl and just played the part, because so many people had said such bad things about her. Or maybe I had only hoped that. It wasn't like we were talking about what was going to happen as we walked from the carnival. I guess it was just understood, and to my surprise, she seemed even more excited than my brother's friends. Though I didn't realize it then, I would much later look back on that experience as a turning point in how I looked at women and sexuality. We are trained from a young age to believe that boys who have sex early are heroes, but girls who do the same are damaged somehow, less valuable after. The truth is that is just the way society views it. Maybe because men are supposedly getting something and women are giving up. I suppose because all a woman has to do is say yes. A man actually has to put out some effort. So it's a challenge for a man, but for a woman, she can get somebody to have sex with her easily. I guess that's why we look at men as studs and women as, how do we say, 304s, I think they call them now. But that night on the grassy hill, the only thing I really believed was that I wanted to be somewhere else. As soon as she was undressed, I still remember that. The first boy was all over her, and she was all over him. Then he finished, and she moved on to the second boy while I just sat there and waited my turn. Okay. Not really knowing what the hell I was supposed to be doing. Was I supposed to watch, be a lookout, cheer them on? All I knew was this was the most uncomfortable I could remember ever feeling. Then they were done, and I was relieved for just about 1 minute. The two boys put their clothes back on. Finally, it was time to go back to the carnival. In reality, it was probably only a total of about 10 minutes that we had been away, but it felt like an eternity. I looked over expecting to see that the girl had put her clothes back on as well, but she hadn't. Worse, she was laying there looking up at me with an expression that no girl had ever given me before. I felt one of my brother's friends nudge me from behind. "You want to have a go?" he asked. "Yeah, your turn," came the other. I was confused. They were 3 years older than me. She was 3 years older than me. Surely, any second now, this beautiful girl was going to start laughing, and then my brother's friends would start laughing, and this whole uncomfortable situation would be over. A terrible joke, but it wasn't. But she didn't laugh. She did the complete opposite, and it's one of those moments that burns their way into the back of a young boy's mind. That look, the one she had given me only a moment before, what I can now, with my 6 decades of experience, call the come get me look. It deepened. It was no longer an invitation, it was a command. As awkwardly as I'm sure you can imagine, I took my clothes off, fumbled my way into position, and with my brother's 2 friends staring at me, lost my virginity to a willing girl on a grassy hill at 13 years old. I think I was 13. Hell, I might have been 12 or 14. Long time ago. But I still remember. And now I have to disappoint every male reading when I tell you that I didn't enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, I didn't find out that I was gay that day or anything like that. I would go on to have many, many wonderful sexual experiences, as you'll come to find out as this story continues on. But that day I was only about 10 parts adolescent hormone machine and 90 parts terrified. The whole thing was confusing and awkward. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even want to be there. I didn't even orgasm. I just did what I thought I had to do so my friends wouldn't think I was weird or gay or weak. After the girl and I had dressed ourselves, the 4 of us walked back to the carnival and spent the rest of our money like nothing in the world had happened. And maybe to them nothing had happened. The encounter had just been something you did. But to me, I had just had my first sexual experience, and even though it was nothing like I would have drawn up for myself in my adolescent mind, I had just taken a giant step toward my dream of being like my 2 heroes in Easy Rider. Remember those guys? Even with this experience behind me, I still found myself terrified of the opposite sex. They seemed like creatures from some other realm. Above me in every way, like the clouds are above the ground. When I was in the 7th grade, there was one girl that I couldn't keep my mind off of. I spent much of that year just thinking of some way to approach her, but I was so afraid of rejection from this angelic being. Even among girls, she was the highest of her class, and I was certain that she would want nothing to do with a nobody like me. You are what you think you are. I thought I was a nobody, and guess what? I was a nobody. She was always in my thoughts, and anytime I saw her, I found myself unable to concentrate on anything else. Her birthday was coming up, and something stirred in me that I couldn't ignore. I was going to do something. This was going to be the moment I broke my childish fears and made my feelings known to this girl I had scarcely even spoken to before. The day before her birthday, I drove my 10-speed bike to the local package store. My mini bike needed repairs, and I hadn't saved enough money to pay for it yet. But I was willing to spend what little money I did have on a card and a bracelet that I thought this amazing creature would like. Using my deepest 13-year-old words, I wrote a message on that card. The next morning I got to school extra early and walked the empty school halls and stopped at her locker. I stood there for a moment, then slid the bracelet through the slots in the locker. I began to do the same with the card. My hand shook as I held it there, half deposited in the angel's locker. Then I pulled it out, stuffed it back in my backpack, and walked away. It wouldn't be until I met a man 10 years my senior that I would gain the confidence to approach girls. With respect for his privacy, I will call him Bill. Bill wasn't a particularly attractive-looking guy. He was overweight, kind of old-looking, and had very little in his life going for him. That much I could tell as a young boy. But Bill knew how to charm the ladies. Get a mentor. Important, get a mentor. I won't go into detail, but I will share 2 outcomes from my lessons with Bill. The first is that women were just as scared of me as I was of them. That seemed impossible to me when he first told me, but everything I saw in his interactions with these majestic creatures seemed to reinforce it. He would approach and I would watch carefully. Sure enough, as a spectator, I could see it clearly in their body language. These girls were nervous. The second lesson, girls respond to confidence. Bill had no business getting the time of day from some of these girls he dated while I knew him. But for some unknowable reason, the guy had game. That was the reason. Bill had a confidence that you could feel, like the sun. When he walked into a room, every girl seemed to respond to it. I used these 2 lessons from Bill like arrows in a quiver as I moved through my adolescence, and sure enough, they found their mark more often than not. Here's what I'm going to tell you. When you walk in a fucking room, walk in it like you own that room, and people will treat you as such. If you get anything out of today's reading, get that. You are what you think you are, and what you are, you present to the world, and they perceive that from you. Important. Remember that. Take a note. Okay. Let me see. But I would later come to realize with great pains and for a long time that attracting women was never the monumental challenge I had made it out to be. Keeping them was. Easier to be a player than to be in a long-term relationship, I'll guarantee you. I started seeing my first girlfriend when I was 14. She was beautiful and kind, responsible. She babysat, and I would often visit her when she would be babysitting. She was my first kiss, which seems strange as I write this since I already lost my virginity. I don't think I kissed that girl, though. But much of my life is strange. But I was in love with this girl, or so I thought. I wanted to be around her all the time, holding her hand, kissing her, telling her how much she meant to me. At 14, it might not surprise you that I told her I loved her not long after we started dating, and she did not say it back. Not long after that, her mom always answered the phone at her house when I would call, and she would never be available to talk. I stopped seeing her in the usual halls between classes at school. I would go 2 or 3 days without seeing her at all. Then, when I would finally spot her, she would duck away or pretend to have not heard me call. I finally caught up with her one day, a few weeks after things had gotten strange, and she told me she had started seeing another boy. I was devastated. In my mind, I had done everything right. I had been kind, loving, and spent all available time with her. I had been the boyfriend I thought I was supposed to be. The opposite of my father, whose relationship with my mother was always bad when it existed at all. How could this have failed me? I realize now, as I'm sure you do reading this, that I had smothered her. Not only that, I had, through every action, convinced her that I was an insecure little boy who had no other means of self-esteem if he did not have her affection. I've had that happen to me later on in life, too. As a man. We're all little boys on the inside and little girls. Okay. And that was true. I was I was the worst thing that a boy can be for a girl with self-confidence. I was needy, and the truth is, I never really loved this girl. Sure, she was pretty, but what I loved was that she was the first girl who was truly kind to me, who took interest in me. In her, I was searching for the love I didn't get from my mom. And when I thought I saw it, I clung to it. That's far too much pressure to put on anyone, much less a girl of 14, confident as she was. It was no wonder she left me. I would have left me too. Neediness. Oh. Get that out of here. Kill the beta. Kill the beta, boys. Okay. This taught me a third lesson about love, though not the one I should have learned. I should have learned that I needed to look inward for confidence, not wear it like armor or try to extract it like sap from relationships with girls. I should have learned that I had inner work to do in order to be a guy worth dating, but that's not what I took away from my first dating experience. I learned that in order to keep a girl, I had to treat them badly. I had to make them feel like it was their honor to be with me, and then, when I had them completely hooked, I had to leave them. After all, in my mind, just like my mom, just like my first girlfriend, they were going to abandon me at some point. I might as well beat them to the punch. So instead of using girls as the replacement for my mom's love never received, they were my mom, and I used them as targets for my anger and pain. I became the worst version of myself to punish them for the sins they had neither committed nor even knew about. If girls were just a tool, they couldn't hurt me, or so I thought. For a long time. I thought that for a long time. It may not surprise you, but that backfired too. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. And what lessons can you take from that? I'll tell you one lesson you can take from that. The sooner you look within and search within yourself for the answers to your problems, the better your life will get. Because at that time in my life, like most of us do, I was still looking outside. I was looking outside for something to make me feel good, to make me feel worthy, to make me feel valuable. And for many years, that worked. Alcohol, drugs, women, motorcycles, those things were my crutches. But as with most of us in life, the day comes when those crutches quit working and you are forced to look within or blow your brains out, one of the two. And as you know, I'm still here, so I didn't do the latter. I did think about it a few times. When everything falls apart, everything that you thought was real, that's when you have a choice to make. What do? You exit this life? Or do you start looking in the only place the answers lie? That's within you. And that's where they are. Everything you see in someone else that annoys you is something inside of you that you don't want to look at. But the reverse of that is this. Everything you see inside of someone that you admire also lies within you. You just need to mine for it, to cultivate it. It's in there. You too have greatness in you. Really, you do. You are excellent in something, but only you can discover what that is. Okay, that's all I have time for today. Shoo, almost 30 minutes. That's a long one for me. Hope you've enjoyed this. We will be on chapter 7, Trouble, on the next version of my book, Coming Back Home, The True Adventure of Mark Daniels. Have a great day.